Welcome to the second episode of Bits and Bytes. I'm Phoenix Perry, your host, and I am bringing you Bits and Bytes on behalf of University of Arts London Creative Computing Institute. And we focus on creative coding, machine learning, and really critical approaches to technology. So, on that note, today, our second guest I'm very honored to have is Janet Gunther. Janet is many things, but one of the most things she's well known for is this project called Restart that she founded about 10 years ago at this point, Janet?
Going on 7, 8, but yeah, the
7, 8
seeds are 10 years old. Yeah.
Cool. So it's a really amazing project, and it really focuses on the sustainability of our technology and trying to create a culture of repair, and also focusing on the bigger issues of colonialism and the impacts our technology has on our life and the globe. How did you get here? What brought you here? What inspired you to do this?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I grew up in the U.S. And I was, I guess, always quite activist and interested in human rights and the environment. Back in the 90s, I feel like environmental activism felt really fresh and kind of edgy and in its own little way. And I'm really interested in international affairs and politics, economics, the global system, as it were. And I basically made my way from working in global development to studying anthropology and colonialism and its legacies, to rolling up my sleeves and getting involved in this project in London, where I was based for many years when I was working internationally.
So tell us about Restart. Like, what is it? What does it do?
Yeah. So, I mean, we're a registered charity, but we call ourselves a project for a reason, because we had a project from day one, which was to, in a way, redefine our relationship with technology and bring a kind of healthy critique, but also, I suppose, bring back our love for technology. And so, I started talking about this with a friend of mine who was also working global development at the time. We were meeting at this meetup. This is the time of the Arab Spring, and there were a lot of things going on for me, even in my job, and I guess personally also, that really drove me to be like, all right, I'm going to do something new. Like, I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to take the plunge. And so we basically came up with this idea of starting through community repair events, using community events as kind of a platform to get literally hands-on with technology and get people fixing the things that were frustrating them, getting them help with things. I guess around that time, like, do you remember, this is kind of slightly before social media became so pervasive, but I could already feel some of my love for the kind of early internet and all of the joy that internet afforded. I could feel it kind of slipping away. And I could feel that everything was becoming, more frustrating, more disposable. We thought we'd get started with these events and get started repairing. But I think we had a larger project, which was like, how do we bring back some of this, I guess, ownership and joy that we had with technology, and community. I think that was really important for us, is like getting people together, in the skill sharing and the stories, and the community that came out of it was amazing. And so from running these events, we started them in 2012. A community of volunteers sprung up out of it, and really, I would say, like, they were the ones that pushed us. Like, they were the ones that said, like, this is we're onto something here. It's not just about, dealing with like the wreckage, the downstream wreckage of the throwaway economy, but we really need to aim upstream. Like, we need to change the way these things work. And so that's why we founded a charity, and we started getting involved in campaigning and collecting data from our events. So now our events are kind of almost like a laboratory as well. So we're sensing, what's happening. And I guess, 7 or 8 years on since then, we started campaigning together with the European campaign that we helped to found for the right to repair, and also pushing here in the UK, although at this precise moment, it's really unclear, what's going to happen in terms of yeah, all kinds of environmental and consumer policies in the UK. But yeah, we've become kind of more than just a, a community-based organization, but a kind of education and campaigning organization as well. But it's constantly evolving. So that's also the exciting thing about the work we do.
What I thought was really interesting when I heard you speak about your project originally, when we first met, was the fact that a lot of people don't even know how to repair the technology that is so ingrained in their everyday lives. Like it's a mystery black box. And I really liked the way that you were just like, why are we throwing these things away? Why are we continually spending more and more money? Like, and I really like this concept that we should be empowered to fix things. So I was wondering if you had any interesting kind of insight into what it's like to go through the process of teaching someone to fix something.
Well, I mean, I can use myself as an example. Like I remember, so the first like event that that we had was actually it was Ugo, a friend of mine who I founded it with, and I had this old. Do you remember those MacBooks, the ones that were white, the kind of beautiful white ones?
Yeah,
those were brilliant, right? Those were brilliant, and I mean, to think that like that because those were highly upgradable. You could pop open the battery bay, and you had to take off this bracket, but you could just upgrade the memory. Like you could take out the battery and upgrade the memory all in like 5 minutes. So but the fear that already at the, even 10 years ago that I had about, because I don't have a technical background. Like in my house growing up, it was like my brother was always, he was always taking stuff apart. He was the technical one. He was the kind of, the tinkerer. And I just never really paid much attention to it. And I guess before I knew it, there I am. I'm scared to actually just upgrade the RAM on a laptop. So we see that all the time with people that it's this, people almost need permission, you know what I mean? Or they need that little extra nudge or boost of courage. And that often comes through doing it with somebody else. So and actually making it a fun occasion. So actually that moment that I opened up that MacBook, we had a bottle of wine, it was like, make it something fun. And it was like a social occasion almost. So I think that, that's really important. I think people, they need permission. They need an invitation. They need it to be fun. They need someone potentially to hold their hand if something goes wrong. And, let's face it, like not all repairs are for everyone. I mean, I'll give you a good example. Like I'm really bummed because the SD card in my expandable Android phone has it got an error, and I'm just like, I want to recover the data from it. And, I don't want to give up on it, but honestly, like it's not for everyone. I've been through 3 or 4 different data recovery apps and tried loads of things. Not all of it's for everyone, but I think it's a good reminder that, we also pay people for things, right? Like there are talented people everywhere who can help us. And, you reach your limit, you do a little bit of research, have a go. Don't have a go if you think you're going to destroy something. Or if it's unsafe, but yeah, and then reach out, find someone who can help you. There's still the repair economy, especially in what relates to electronics, is still quite healthy. So, and we've been doing some mapping of the repair economy also, because there is that question, okay, who do I trust? Who, and especially with data, right? It's like, who do I trust? Who can I trust? And that's a big issue. Like, and that's something we need to kind of address as a society going forward. I mean, I don't know if you've heard this, and a lot of people haven't heard this, but Google banned advertisements from third-party IT support. They just blanket banned all adverts because they said that there was like scamming happening or something.
So like if you are an IT support company that repairs phones, you can't find that on Google anymore?
No, they've all the third party. I mean, I'm sure some of the larger companies have maybe like found an exception, but all of the smaller, repair services, they've just been banned from Google Ads. So, it's a huge issue. Like, and a lot of companies do thrive off of word of mouth, but honestly, that's not good enough. If you're having some kind of crisis at home and something essential for you fails, you need to know where to turn to. So, it isn't easy. It isn't easy. But there's also, the other cool thing about the age we live in, right, is if you told me even 10 years ago how much repair information there would be like on YouTube. I mean, it is mind blowing how much people share. So, and that's one of the upsides, I suppose, of the age we live in. We're dealing with all these kind of different, I guess, different forms of obsolescence, but at the same time, we've got like a huge amount of information at our fingertips. And, I guess it's a game of cat and mouse, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because like I still don't know how to like, and I am crafty. Like I am an extremely crafty person. I will solder something, I will take something apart. I still don't know how to fix a toaster. Like I have no idea how to repair a coffee pot or
Yeah.
even like basic things like if a heater breaks, I'm like, what do I do with this? Because I think that there's a lot of information on the internet for making and building your own electronics, right? Or for modifying like small battery operated like keyboards or whatever. But when it comes to like household items, like something like a toaster, like they're just not designed for that. And like, you're like, what do I do here? And like, you don't want to electrocute yourself. Like I have
absolutely
that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, and I mean, obviously, like any mains device, we need to take great care with. But the thing is, you can also learn about electrical safety on the internet, and there's a lot of really good information about that. And but you're right. I mean, there's a certain category of like household product that's just been, the cost has been so squeezed out of it intentionally that there's very little incentive to actually to fix it commercially or to learn how to fix it. And it is a shame. Like a lot of those skills are actually being lost, and so that's yet another reason that we host community events, is because a lot of the people that volunteer, in fact, they're not necessarily that interested in waste prevention or some of the other noble aspects, but they really just actually really want to pass on their skills to the next generation. And it's sad to think of a world where like a toaster is used for, I don't know, a couple of months, and then it ends up in the shredder at best.
What I think is really interesting is I've been this year at the CCI, I've been teaching a critical computing class. And one of the things that I've focused on is sustainability and technology, and looking at the like colonial impact that our technology has on the global South and what that means, where our trash goes and how it gets mined and how it gets like recovered, and metals get stripped out and data gets stripped out and computers get rebuilt and monitors get repurposed. Like that to me is like an extremely rich and fascinating space, because it sits in this uncomfortable relationship to this same economy that you and I are talking about, right?
Yeah.
And these two situations feed off each other in a way that really shows a lot of like, frankly, Western racism and colonialism towards different parts of the world. And like this kind of idea that huge parts of the world are just like homes for our trash.
Yeah, I mean, there has been a lot of work done on like, so it is actually illegal under the Basel Convention to export e-waste from like, a developed country to a less developed country, although those categories are hopelessly outdated. But yeah, but it's actually more complex, isn't it? Because as you say, some countries are actually refurbishing equipment, and some of the regulations and the way they're enforced, they're complicated. So it's a whole complex issue, but we often see a lot of simplification, like, all of our waste is getting shipped to Ghana, and it's actually a small part of it is, and that should be definitely dealt with. But actually countries like Ghana have their own emerging waste problems. And,
yes,
ultimately, it's not so sexy, is it, to help Ghanaians, create their own regulatory systems and enforce regulations, and but that's ultimately kind of, I think, where the focus should be. And yeah, it's all these issues are super, super complex. I mean, even the imagery of the e-waste, like cable burning and some of the more, horrendous imagery that we've seen, it kind of it creates a simplification in the mind of the observer. And having worked on land rights issues and worked with informal settlements, like I can just see that the ways in which some of the Western gaze has actually been used against like people with less rights and people in those places, and to clear, for example, let's clear this dump site, or let's clear this recycling neighborhood. And for example, the Chinese did a really intense clearance of one of the most famous e-waste treatment areas in China. I don't know how that worked out, but if you were at the sharp end of that, I'm pretty sure it was pretty violent. So so there's some real questions about how we can act, I guess, in solidarity with people that pick waste, that process waste in other parts of the world. And I guess we need to just be a little bit careful with some of the most alarming imagery, and understand that, I guess, like we need to be in it for the long haul. Like we need to help these countries with regulation, remediation, all of it, and not just be like, oh, kind of, we must criminalize the export of e-waste and we're done with it.
Yeah, I don't think it's that, because like there's so the film I watched was literally by a harvester, and that's an entire economy. That's an entire way of life that is now emerged as a result of this relationship. And their livelihoods that are based on that now, their livelihoods that are based on rebuilding like really decent technology out of harvesting different like thrown away PCs. Because this guy throws away this PC and it's got a blown out RAM, and this PC has a great RAM. Guess what's going to happen?
I mean, to be honest, that's what should be happening here. And so
exactly.
The conversation about, like waste colonialism is really interesting, because like ultimately, I really think that what we do not want is this kind of financialized corporate waste treatment model to be exported to those other parts of the world where we still have, highly efficient and, fascinating economies of reuse. Because if we export the model we have here, which is basically like the big shred, it's like collect it, shred it, melt it. We've skipped over like many steps that are much more interesting and important for the planet. I mean, the one thing that happened last year, I don't know if you saw this, but Apple basically won in Norway's Supreme Court against this small business that was importing refurbished screens from China. And it was a very complicated case. Like Apple used its trademark, essentially. It has its trademark on so many different parts of the screen assembly on purpose. It's kind of like weaponized its trademark.
Wow.
And of course, these businesses in China that are doing the refurbishing, they don't distinguish between a screen for internal use and for export. And for whatever reason, in China, people want the fake trademarks. They want the fake things. And so basically what happens is if you're importing refurbished screens in, let's say in Europe, it's like a game of roulette. You don't know whether you're going to get the one that's clean of all that, or whether you're going to get the one with all the fakey trademarks and stuff. And that's what Apple counts on. They intercept that stuff. And so basically they're in a way, they found a way to criminalize reuse of their components, on a global level.
I'm really disgusted by that and not at all surprised, because I actually think the cultures like this, that was for me when I was watching these films that I was seeing, particularly this one film. I can't remember the name of it. It's been a couple of weeks since I watched it. And it was just a short, tiny little documentary on YouTube. But like, I was like, wow, this is advanced. I just like thought to myself, like the technical knowledge here of reuse and reclaiming and understanding like on a fundamental level, some of the firmware and some of the middleware, and like really being able to like do that is like some serious, that's like you've got a computer science degree or higher.
It's we were talking with David Lee, who's interesting in the maker arena in China, and he was saying, it's actually illegal to reuse an integrated circuit, to reuse chips, because it's patented. Like the software that you need to use these chips is basically copyright, and technically Like, you could actually reuse a lot of components even on circuit boards. Yet, like, intellectual property rights like stand in the middle and prevent this. I mean, obviously, like you said,
Right.
there's people across the world who are not stopped by that. And there's some really amazing examples of reuse. Like, I don't know which ones you're referring to, but like of lithium batteries, for example.
Mhm.
You know, there's a lot of kind of amateur and interesting reuse of lithium batteries, and that could actually have big impacts, in relation to,
Mining.
climate, yeah, and
Yeah.
renewable energy, and all kinds of things in future. So I think, yeah, that's crucially important, that that we look at the kind of, I suppose, like the ecosystem around reuse and, intellectual property and all of those emerging issues. It's yeah, we have like this growing mountain of e-waste in the world, and yet all we really hear about mostly in policy circles is like, how do we recycle it?
It's not
But
enough.
really, yeah, are we
Yeah.
still at that stage? It's
Because
like,
recycling is extremely expensive. That's what I think a lot of people don't realize, that to recycle something, you have to spend energy. Whereas
yeah,
to use something again, or to reuse, or to live in a more gift-based economy where you trade technology with people, or you have a community like the Restart community where you meet and you share knowledge and tips and fix things, like that, I think, is the way forward, versus
yeah.
spending like ridiculous amounts of heat and energy and electricity to like melt and shred. I didn't even know that they were shredding. Like, I was like,
Oh yeah,
whoa, what is
yeah.
this?
No,
Please
I mean,
explain.
and it's like, I mean, ultimately, it's things of the other thing with recycling is just that it's just the investment is not there. So, right, the
Mhm.
investment is on the design, is on the innovation,
Mhm.
on production side,
Mhm.
but the investment on recycling is just simply not keeping up. So, if you look at, how you look at the complexity of electronics and how they've
Mhm.
become, okay, they've become miniaturized, but they've become so much more complex
Mhm.
materially. Well, a lot of the new materials that are being, used, there simply is not like a recycling process to, to capture them in the quantity that we need. And so instead, what we have is, we have, it's funny because rare earth metals, of course, are elements. They're not rare, right? They're not at all rare. It's just that they're terrible to mine. They're absolutely terrible to mine. I mean,
Eek,
they
yeah.
occur they occur most frequently near radioactive materials.
Mm,
Where they don't appear near radioactive materials, they appear in places where there's not enough regulation, right, around like
right.
the environmental impact. So, and yet we have this just kind of pretty much like, linear throwaway approach to those materials and electronics. And obviously there's research going into it, and Europe is saying, oh, we can't be dependent on China, so we're going to research this. But I mean, yeah, it's just the progress is slow when you look at, when you compare with the process of like, and all the investment that goes into innovation for these new products.
The innovation, design thinking, kind of West Coast export manufacture in China model itself is filthy. Like, it is extremely problematic, and it paints Chinese culture in a way that I think is, if you have at all taken a look at how much innovation is going on in
Well,
China,
exactly. Yeah.
it's just like, are you, this is the tail wagging the dog here. Like, what are you
Yeah.
thinking?
No, I
Like,
know. And also, if you like I mean, think about like how, how closed and like how boring, and there's a really cool film that Wired magazine did.
mhm,
It was about Shenzhen, being the kind of Silicon Valley of hardware. And
right.
it just showed how boring, like are the kind of, I guess, the non the tech world is outside of some of these places where it's all being
Mhm.
created and manufactured, because we
Yeah.
have, every phone, well, this is ancient, but every phone more or less looks like this. It's just it's boring. And the biggest innovation we have to talk about is like ultra books where there's a touch screen, or where you can remove the
Are
screen,
you
and it's
joking?
like that's like the big innovation in laptops in like the past, I don't know how many years. It's just, I do think that we live in this kind of monoculture. Yeah, that it's very much influenced by the kind of trendsetters or tastemakers in Silicon Valley and elsewhere. But I do get like indications that that may be changing somewhat. There's a couple of interesting things that kind of came across our radar screen in the last year. One was, do you remember Sonos Gate?
Yes, I do.
Yes, because everyone was like, "What the hell?" Like, I bought into the system because it's like modular and upgradable, and then you just say, "No, you can't use the old speakers," and it created this huge. And not only can you not use them, we're going to brick them.
That's nuts.
Recycle mode.
Yeah. Nuts. Yeah. So, why would you do that? Why would you brick a $400, $1,000 working speaker? Like, it's just what?
Well, yeah, if you recycle mode, according to them, is just, shred. Exactly. Prepare it for shredder. So that created like an unexpected, I would say, backlash and kind of just massive moral outrage in the kind of, I would say, in the community of people that are like, that love tech, that absolutely like early adopters. And we were really shocked at that because, we also felt like, okay, we thought that most people had really been, how can I say, kind of lulled into a sense of, good feeling about recycling. Or, okay, take the old thing, recycle it when you get a new thing. But actually what that revealed is that people are not okay with that model. That there is a lot of, and another thing that happened recently, which really drew my attention to this, was just this, in the UK during the third lockdown, the BBC did this huge push to get people to donate older laptops. And it really, it hit a chord. Like, people were, we were really shocked with the outpouring of donations, but also the interest in it. And the way in which people made the connection between, okay, an injustice or inequity in society and a piece of old hardware in their cupboard or in their closet. And it made me think that something has shifted, that people are not content just to go to the recycling center and throw an old PC into a skip if they know that, it still can function a little bit. So I really do think things have changed. And even like, I think it was last week, we saw this YouTuber, Linus Tech, Linus.
Yeah.
He went on a total tirade about the new graphics, Bitcoin mining versus graphics cards for gamers, and how manufacturers are trying to force certain cards only for Bitcoin or for cryptocurrency mining, and basically making them impossible for gamers to use. And he ended his amazing rant by basically saying, this is environmentally totally irresponsible. And I almost like fell out of my chair because I haven't really seen that from this kind of the people who love tech. But I think the tide is shifting. I really do.
Yeah, I think that there are a couple of other things I want to cover during this interview that I think are really important. And one of them is I want to talk to you about maker culture. And I want to talk to you about the culture of consumerism inside maker culture. So I would like to have you kind of compare and contrast like what's going on with Restart versus like, say, a Arduino class where this is something that happens at CCI, and it's been an issue that like I raised originally as like, let's harvest. And then there's the whole like health and safety, lead-based solder. There's the whole thing, right? There's this whole like, what about people with asthma? Like, so I think now that the conversations come around and folks are interested in like finding ways that we could still do that kind of thing. But I have been teaching PComp now or physical computing now for about 6 or 7 years. And the amount of e-waste those classes produce in my just vision is tremendous. So I thought I would kind of talk to you a little bit about those two things and the benefits. So I'm going to just let you take it because I feel like if I ask you a question, it won't even scratch the surface of how much you probably thought about this.
Well, I have thought about it. I mean, but actually not a super amount. I mean, I guess I've also seen it in kind of ed tech, kind of
Mm-hmm.
these products that are targeted at kids,
Yep.
which I really like. I won't name some of them, but I think they're almost doing it. Like they're almost doing a good job of it, and then
Mm-hmm.
they kind of somehow fall short. And it's I think some of them have started to look at, okay, when I release a new version or a new product, I should release like a reuse kit or a reuse
Mm-hmm.
project with the old one. Now that's a step. That's good. But there is this way in which, like, it's just that inevitably some of this ed tech and maker products, they exist in a consumerist context. I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
can't divorce them entirely from our culture of consumption. I mean, um, yeah, some of the websites feel very different. Like it's not like you're going to, a shop in the shopping mall or whatever, but
Mm-hmm.
we still live in that world where, newer is better by default. And where, yeah, where it's like a chore to have to deal with something old. And I think that like Raspberry Pi and some other organizations have done noble things in promoting reuse projects. But I think, how can I say, I feel like that reuse and like stewardship of things shouldn't just be like an extra project on your kind of in your gallery of projects. It somehow needs to be like, it really needs to be kind of hard baked into the whole ethos and philosophy of a certain kind of hardware or a certain approach. You know, I just, yeah, it feels still like a little bit of it's tacked on. Like when it's approached, it's kind of like, here's something you can do with your spare time, or if you feel so moved. But it's not. There's no, for example, is there a discussion about, do I need to upgrade? Do I need this new thing? What does this new product afford me that the old one doesn't? I don't see that with a lot of this. And I guess it's hard for especially for companies making small batches, to do the right thing environmentally, to come up with a life cycle assessment, to approach all these issues. It is hard, and it can in some way, I suppose, be seen as like a limit to what you can do, and a kind of a buzzkill or whatever. But I think we need to change that mentality. I mean, I think that sustainability and a more sustainable approach, it actually needs to be one of those kind of like positive constraints, one of those like positive challenges that you
Yes.
have. And makers and creators are used to those, right? It's like, oh well, I can't get a thing that does X, Y, and Z, but I'll have to use a version that's not as ideal. So I adjust. So I like, and I think that that sustainability needs to become one of those kind of one of those things, and the kind of a life cycle approach just needs to be baked into everything that we do.
Yeah, for sure. I've definitely struggled with the maker movement with this.
Mm,
When I first started teaching, I started noticing a bunch of things. One is that hardware design, the actual
mm,
components and the process itself, is ableist just as it could be. Like, if you're blind, you're out of luck, right? If you have real serious physical mobility or impairments, there's no options there. There's so much space that I feel like the maker community could come in and really
mm,
empower a lot of different communities through kinds of more accessible electronics. But beyond that, I was seeing a lot of things where somebody would take, and there's some very guilty parties here that I shall not name by name, but they would take an 80-cent component, mount it on a breakout board, and charge a ridiculous amount of money, like
yeah.
$8. And all they had done is literally had another piece of e-waste created in China and shipped to them and then sold it back.
Yeah.
And I would just feel like, whoa, what is happening here? This is so wrong. You just spent 100 pounds
Yeah.
on components that should have cost
No,
you a
it's crazy.
pound, two
No, I mean,
pounds.
what you were saying about like, earlier about like, is it, there's so many possibilities for the maker movement as well. Like
Mhm.
to think of like a commons, a materials commons, a parts commons, a component commons. I always think like, and I think we were talking about this a couple of years ago in London, like,
Mhm.
why isn't there, a materials commons among makers, maker spaces? I
For
mean,
sure.
this stuff should actually kind of like, I mean, it should be free. Obviously, it shouldn't be free because there are costs that would go into,
Mhm.
maintaining a commons,
Mhm.
but they should be almost free. A lot of this stuff
Yeah.
should just be almost free.
Or
Because
subscription based, like very
there you go.
affordably with some sort of
Or
economic
on loan.
sliding scale. Loan is a good
There you
one.
go.
Yeah, loan on loan. It's like a lot. Imagine this, a library.
Yeah, no, I mean, no, I think, but
Yeah.
so I actually think that is the real challenge of people in this space
Mhm.
is it's actually a pretty radical kind of rethink of the way we make things, the way we use materials.
Mhm.
And I mean, the thing is, the it has such promise. The maker community has such promise. But I would say that there has been a real capture by by a certain kind of maker. And one of our favorite critiques is by Philippe Fonseca, who I definitely recommend you read his essay on this, and we can share the link. But he's a Brazilian maker who just kind of characterizes the situation as of maybe a couple years ago, but I don't
Mhm.
think it's changed too much, which is that it's just this very North American kind of like kind of venture capital idealizing vision of hardware and of products. And
Mm.
you
Yeah,
know
it's really problematic because it pitches this idea, and goes to a myth that is my least favorite myth in all of technology. And like, I think it needs to be taken out and burned, is the hacker myth. I
mm,
hate that myth. I hate the myth of the white guy in the black hoodie who's a super genius who, like, oh, please, like,
yeah, there's a major problem with stock imagery.
oh,
Like,
it's so
like
bad.
even for us, it's so funny. It's so
Oh,
funny, Phoenix, because like whenever outlets don't want to pay for images,
mhm.
and we, by the way, all of our images are available on Creative Commons, like
Mhm.
for reuse, right?
Oh, that's
But
happened with me too. And sometimes that bites you. I've been,
well, okay, I can see that, but we haven't had any examples of that just yet. But
mm,
because we're trying to push back against this,
mhm,
like if you look at just this, and we've thought about it even as a business opportunity, is like
mhm,
the stock images of fixing, of
mhm.
repair. I mean, it's the same probably with making and hacking. It's like it would be
Oh,
comical, but it has like actual real consequences on
it really
people.
does. It does. I'm going to just say Google women soldering iron.
Oh
It's
no.
It's so bad. Like, I tweeted one ages ago that I found because like I run a nonprofit called Co-Liberation, and I've begun to question whether liberation through technology is even possible in the last couple of years. But I would always Google women plus, and just to throw funny images, like women eating salad has made a hilarious, feature in some of the Code Lab things. But women plus soldering iron, there's a woman, like all the women are holding the actual soldering iron metal bit. The part that gets to like, 400
Oh
degrees.
my god. That's just wrong.
And
That's
you're
wrong.
like, whoa.
Yeah.
What are some
No.
of the bad repair ones like that?
I mean, it's mostly just like, well, yeah, there are definitely also like images of like people clearly not repairing anything with like, yeah, anyway, you know what that probably looks like. It's just like somebody has like flat laid some components or or
Oh,
the kind of super how can I say, like super macho kind of, yeah, workshop type images of, men and their tools and stuff. And
so bad. But that
yeah.
stuff gets propagated through the media, and then it impacts kids, and they begin to see technology in a certain way. And there is a real value in fighting that kind of nonsense because it's super
Yeah.
dangerous, right?
Yeah. No, we've
Um,
definitely done that. We've tried to host we have like we call it Rosie the Restarter, which is like a series of events, like skill shares for women and
mhm,
non-binary people.
mhm,
And that's been really important. And we haven't just kind of left it at that. We've had this series of events that are, they're for us, like a
mhm.
space for us. but we've also tried to kind of almost create like I don't want to call it like a girl gang, but when we have our events, we'd like to make sure that we put the Rosies, as it were, together, so that there's kind of a feeling of like camaraderie, and it's not that we're like trying to separate ourselves from the male repairers. It's just that it really does help to kind of create a sense of belonging and just kind of camaraderie.
There are a lot of real reasons to do it. And I really question, because, my organization only works with women and non-binary femme identifying people. Like, I'm extremely, at that intersection myself. And the reason I focus on that is because our culture has been so systematically busted in that regard, that a lot of the gender roles that are baked into people's brains, like if you've got that kind of dynamic going on, are really harmful in an educational setting. So like, if you can just kind of remove that and be like, here's the soldering iron, there is no one here to help you. You are going to have to figure this out. This is going to be super duper fun. But, I just have so often been teaching a class, and I watch the guy come over and try and do it, and you're like, oh, why you do these things? And it's because it's the culture, and women and men are equally, and non-binary folks are equally skilled on repair and equally skilled on ability. You're not born with any of this magic knowledge or magic.
Yeah, no, it's definitely like, it starts so early, right? Because it's like, when the girl child takes apart the vacuum cleaner, it's like, oh, what have you done? And when the boy child does it, it's like, oh, he's gonna future engineer.
Yeah, that's definitely my childhood right there.
It saddens me. I reflect back and I think, well, I guess I was always just really socially minded and interested in reading and language and things. But, I also had an older brother who'd kind of already occupied that space in a way. And, I kind of wonder whether, like, if things have been different, if I might have, like pursued some of those things. Probably not. But it's important. I think that parents should really keep this in mind, like, in watching kids and working with kids. And one thing that was really positive in my childhood was my best friend, Paul, who lived next door. His dad had a wood shop, and we made stuff in the wood shop together. And there was no, like, I definitely was just treated like, I guess, one of the boys, as it were. but it was really, which
is also positive. Problematic. But
it is. But it was the 80s, man.
It was the 80s. You and I are lucky that like they didn't force us into power suits or trailers. Those are the only two options for us growing up. The only two role models were 80s power suit or
oh man, yeah.
Oh God, it was so bad. It was so bad. The 80s. Oh, it's a time.
I know, but it's, the crazy thing is, like, sometimes in looking at some of these gender issues, like, I actually feel like, for example, the gendering of toys and certain things has actually gotten worse.
Yes,
really, it has gotten worse since the 80s.
It really has. And there's a whole market on it. Like there's whole research and the gendering of our technology and the repairability and the idea of repair and who the maker stuff gets sold to and why, and what the maker stuff for girls looks like and why. And it's just a whole situation. There are a few organizations that have tried to do things about it, but most of them have just made me violently angry. Because I see it and I'm like, no, the answer is to not take an electronics kit and make it pink.
Yeah, no, and there have been some pretty horrendous like fails in that. As I don't have kids, I really can't speak about like what the solutions are, but I kind of think like really whatever works to get to have girls hands-on, to make them feel like they belong, to have them asking the same kind of questions that boys are, and to let them follow their passions and curiosities. I think I'm kind of in the, I hate the pink tools like everybody else. Just it makes me feel uncomfortable. However, if that's what works, like honestly, I just think girls need to be encouraged, and
Yeah.
and it shouldn't just be, it shouldn't be a fashion item. It shouldn't just be something
No.
you do.
And also,
But
like,
whatever it takes. Yeah.
also, I just can't imagine what that would feel, seeing that as a person who's non-binary and young, and just feeling that, feeling just isolated and alienated about all of it, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I hope that the rise of a wider spectrum of gender makes these kids just look at this stuff and go, no. I really do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I do think, though, that there still is not enough reflection in tech spaces about these issues of power, and and it's not just gender, right? I mean, there's a lot of other issues at play. Like, one of the things, it's been really revealing, like, seeing these companies like Google and Facebook and deal with the clear problems that their employees of color and disabled people, all kinds of different people, are voicing these problems.
Yes.
And they don't, I see no real commitment to actually deal with the issues.
Zero.
And no,
it's a culture of disrespect that goes from how they Apple predatorily deals with hardware and repair, to how they deal with their employees and how they treat these kinds of issues. Google, really much, really problematic, right? Like, both of them have been really bad at addressing these issues. And if you look at how they treat anything that is not this kind of stereotypically, like, Western male persona, like, you see the whole problem. Like, it spreads like in this culture of disrespect.
And I think it's not a coincidence that you see, that it's in smaller businesses, or in startups and other businesses. You are seeing more, that's where, a lot of people who are not, as you say, from that group, that's where they end up. And I think it's not a bad thing. And in fact, I think some of these businesses have the potential to actually, really shake things up and change the world. But I think I still, in terms of, like, what I see coming out of, like, the kind of the tech industry, or, like, the interest in tech and tech media and everything, it still feels very monocultural. Like,
yes, very much.
Culture change has yet to really fully kind of permeate through, or come up through from the, I guess, I don't think the industry has a grassroots, but whatever that is, like, come up from smaller businesses and startups and things. And I guess, I don't know, like, maybe some of these big companies actually need just to be broken up or fail altogether for things to really change.
I am really just, like, a giant piece of me is hoping that all the repair knowledge that's being built up in countries like Ghana, that's being built up in countries that are dealing with building more, like, kind of almost sustainable practices, that a kind of leapfrogging will happen at some point. That, like, new innovation, the West is running out of ideas. Like,
it's already happening. I mean, like I was saying, on the lithium reuse stuff, there's so many areas I can point to where we're already being kind of leapfrogged in that. Yeah.
And I think it's super exciting. Well, this has been an amazing episode of Bits and Bytes. And as always, I could talk to you forever.
Yeah.
And it's super good just to have an excuse to talk to you, because it's been too long and we've been in lockdown. And even though you've been relatively close a huge amount of the time, like, I might as well be calling you from Mars, like, 12-minute delay. So thank you. And if somebody wants to find out more about you, where do they go? How do they do it?
Yeah, our website's therestartproject.org, and we have a podcast where we talk about a lot of the stuff that we're talking about now, so check that out as well. And we're on social media.
What's the podcast called?
It's just The Restart Podcast. It's on our website. And you can find us on social media at Restart Project. And we offer, repair advice, repair help online. So if you got something that's broken, and you're stuck and you need some help, ask us for help.
That's amazing. All right. Thanks, Janet.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.